Good morning, everybody. Slight issue with Wi-Fi on my end today. I'm actually traveling at the moment, so I'm not on the most stable connection, but I thought I had a proper Wi-Fi. I haven't. Um, we're going to look today at an interesting topic. It's one of those things that you think at first, look, this is new learning for me, but as we go through what is emotional intelligence, it's not necessarily new learning. It's something that you're doing as human beings every day, using emotional intelligence in one way or the other. But it's also something that clearly, as a trainer and a people person, delivering your what you know and your knowledge to another person and doing knowledge transfer between human beings, emotional intelligence is really quite important. So the caveat I'd put on this session is this is not going to be a massive deep dive into emotional intelligence. We're developing a course to do that at the moment. That should be ready very, very soon. This is more a look at what is emotional intelligence, and actually why is there a benefit to driver trainers using their understanding of an emotional intelligence and skills and knowledge to develop the emotional intelligence of their pupils to driver training and also running your business as well, to a certain extent, because actually, as I'll talk about later on, if you're an emotionally intelligent business provider, you'll be more intuitive with customers, you'll be more in touch with what customers want and need and deliver that. And that's a nice little cycle of life, as it were, with your customers, where they like what you do, you know what they need, and you grow your business through that. Just a little housekeeping, and Martin and Co, I will come back to you in a moment. Oh, no, just a raise hand to say you can see me. Just a little bit of housekeeping. You can use the chat function that you'll either see in your top bar of your Zoom screen or in the bottom bar, depending how you have it displayed, just to chat amongst yourself, share views and experiences, all those kind of things. If you've got specific questions, stick them in the Q&A function. It's just me driving the car today. I haven't got Howard or anybody else looking over the questions whilst I'm chatting, and vice versa. So I will try and dance between chat, presenting, and Q&A. But yeah, specific burning questions whilst we're doing the presentation, I have no problem you stopping me and asking me as we go. But any chat, keep it to the chat, and I'll focus on the Q&A primarily just to make sure I'm picking up your questions. And then at the end, I'll do a wash up where I look at your questions as well. Okay, so we're going to make a start on this. So one of the first kind of emotional kind of things we can do with our pupils in terms of displaying emotional intelligence and kind of like giving them a comfortable arena in which to come into training with you and build an emotional bond of some kind is a check-in. So in the start of this session, you are approaching some new learning in some level for the first time, like a pupil will be approaching their first learning session with you. So there'll be a degree of different feelings going on as you enter into a new area of learning today and come into this webinar that are not that far apart from times from what your pupils are going to feel meeting you for the first time and entering into an area of learning that they've never delved into before. So it's useful to check in with pupils the first time you meet them and in every lesson to see how they're feeling, because not only have they got these nerves and this anticipation and you're not knowing what they're coming into, they might also be bringing some emotional baggage into this process with them as well. So just from your guys' point of view, with a show of the emojis, thumbs up or is there a thumbs down? I can't remember there was a thumbs down, but how are you guys feeling today? Are you feeling good? Are you feeling enthusiastic about this? There shouldn't be any nerves because it's a webinar. You're not sat in front of me. You're not going to be made a test, but feelings start to come into learning at the absolute outset. See a slightly surprised and scared face. So don't be perturbed. We won't do anything too difficult. So checking in at the start of any learning session with anybody you're training is really important, and just not necessarily putting them on the spot and asking them how they feel, but understanding they're going to be approaching a new learning experience with some degree of trepidation, or maybe other stuff going on in their lives that, if you seem empathetic from the get-go and supportive, they should start to feel better about the learning process. So let's just go to why is it not, hang on, sorry, let me get rid of my screen here. So next slide. So remember, students may be checking in with some emotional baggage to start, and give them a chance maybe to unpack that at the start of a lesson or session. Again, a little bit of self-reflection to start them off. I don't want you to necessarily share this with us, but just think for a moment. is there something in your life that you're currently struggling with or is challenging you in your personal life or your business? So just think about that issue. I don't want you to get upset or anything like that, but just think about that issue and think about how that issue is making you feel. Think about the emotions that you associate with that issue. And then think about how do those emotions and that situation impact your work and how you're feeling about coming to learn something today. And then how you felt about entering the workshop in an area of new learning. The feelings, whilst I'm chatting, they'll still be thinking about that. Think about how it makes you feel, and think about then that the things that you're dealing with and how you feel that impacts your work, and think about how that might feel to a pupil coming to learn to drive for the first time, or just a lesson, even if they've had 40 hours with you. If they're struggling with something else in their lives, it's going to affect their learning. If they're feeling something emotionally, it's going to affect their learning. So getting you to self-reflect sometimes on how things that are happening outside of your role and the emotions you feel about that, as well as the emotions you feel of the task of teaching with all the stresses and pressures, you start to feel a little bit of empathy for how a pupil might be feeling, kind of approaching learning to drive with you. And we've all always got something else going on other than the task that we're doing at this time. So yeah, just bearing in mind, emotional intelligence is tapping into your feelings to some degree and understanding how they impact you, and then being able to better understand your fellow human being because you've got that empathy with them about how they might be struggling. And things that are going on in your life, they range from the slightly less emotional thing of it's a distraction and it stops you focusing as much as you should on your work, to it's really stressful and really upsetting and you just feel like you're wrestling with toffee all the time, and coming to your driving lessons day is the last thing you want, and you're really going to struggle with concentration and everything like that. So it's tapping into human emotions, understanding those from your perspective, as well as being understanding of somebody else going through those things. So, classic way to talk about any new topic, and a really easy way for a presenter to fill up a few slides, is to look at the known definitions for a theory or a principle that already exists in the world. So a quick definition of what emotional intelligence is. Emotional intelligence plays a crucial role in our individual, personal, and professional success. So it's across everything that we do. Our interaction with our domestic personal relationships, our interaction with our work relationships. We all know we are emotional beings, and we can try and take that out of certain situations we think we shouldn't be too emotional, like work, but they will creep in. And understanding our emotions and how to manage them better will make us better at managing them and helping other people manage them. It's one of the types of intelligence that accompanies quite a range of skills and attributes like self-awareness, empathy, emotional regulation, i.e. controlling our regulation, and effective communication. And I think if you see those words there, those skills, you've got to have them in your role, right? This is what a trainer, regardless of what you're training, has to have. And equally, it's what a particular driver trainer who works on, with quite a lot of vulnerability in their pupils. They're in a learning environment they've never been in before. They're on a weird, in a way, if we think about it, one-on-one learning environment, the close confines of a vehicle. So it's quite a different time for people to be in that world where they're emotional. The Cambridge Dictionary defines emotional intelligence as an ability to understand the way people feel and react, and use this skill to make good judgments and to avoid or solve problems. Again, with a show of thumbs up if you feel this applies to you. Does this doesn't seem so alien a concept to driving instructors? Do you feel that you recognize you have a role that involves a huge degree of emotional intelligence? Good. So I'm not talking about anything that is alien. And that's why I said at the start of this, when you look at a new topic of learning, you think, oh, God, don't really know anything about that. But then when you break it down in a commonsensical way, you can relate to it and think, oh, I'm actually already doing some of these things. I'm already recognizing some of these things as well. So moving on, the kind of godfather of EQ and emotional intelligence is a gentleman called Daniel Goleman. He was a psychologist, unsurprisingly, an author, and he was the founder, really, of the principles of emotional intelligence. So the term emotional intelligence itself was coined by a couple of professors at Yale and New Hampshire, Salvos and Mayer. And Salvos and Mayer define it as the subset of social intelligence that involves the ability to monitor one's own, so your own feelings and others' feelings and emotions, to discriminate amongst them, to be able to recognize what they are, prioritize them, understand them, and decide what you want to do with them, and use this information to guide your own thinking actions. So it's not just about your feelings, it's also about the information you're picking up and the intelligence of how someone else is feeling and how you're feeling about that, and how you marry those things together and decide what to do about that as well. So those are the kind of recognized definitions of what emotional intelligence is. Emotional intelligence, again, it includes the ability to know yourself and what motivates you, and to be able to modify your emotions. So as a trainer, it's about doing that, knowing yourself and how you should approach a situation and how your emotions impact your delivery of training. But then it's coaching the person that you're training to be able to do that themselves, because actually we can't create what we see as the the holy grail in our industry, which is creating a thinking, feeling driver who's more aware of sharing the road and looking out for risks and wanting to be safe. We can't create that holy grail of a thinking driver unless we develop their emotional intelligence. It's not just about, we recognize that in modern driver training, maneuvering a car from A to B. It is about somebody recognizing they share the road, the risks of the road, what will happen, what are the consequences if we don't do that safely, and how do they develop the right behaviors to be able to maneuver that car around safely. So that's why emotional intelligence is really important for driver trainers, because if we're trying to seek behavioral change in particularly young people and other ages of driver, we can't do that really without understanding the emotional being and developing their emotional responses to things. So that's why we get to that. It also obviously is about being able to not only understand yourself, but use the skills you're developing in emotional intelligence to read the emotions and needs of others and provide the support when they need it. For some individuals, it's about developing empathy or a sense of understanding for the learner and the journey they're going through and the context in which they might be undertaking the journey as well. So you've got to get them from A to B in a technical knowledge sense and a safety sense, but you've also got to design a learning program that is good and suitable for that specific learner who is coming to learning with a whole different set of emotions and this diverse pupil population that you've got. You have to tweak that learning journey to suit that pupil, then their educational needs, but also their emotional and other needs as well. Otherwise, it's just kind of just trying to keep banging your head against the wall and neither of you get a productive result about it. So you have to understand that pupil and become client-centered to be able to deliver a learning plan that works for both of you. So there's 5 stages to the emotional intelligence world, as it were, and how we identify those. And Daniel Goleman, as in the OG, the godfather of emotional intelligence, identified these 5 stages originally. So the 5 attributes are self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. So to become an emotionally intelligent being, we fundamentally have to have awareness of self and how we interact with people and others. We have to be able to self-regulate our emotions. We have to remain motivated, not just as a trainer. Your job is to deliver the emotional intelligence for pupils to become motivated to be a better driver, to not just reach the goal of a driving test, but to want to be a safer driver. We have to have empathy to do the job of training people, but you're also going to use that understanding of empathy to develop empathy in pupils, because empathy is really important in wanting to be a safe driver, right, and share the road safely, and also developing social skills to a certain extent. Actually, what we don't necessarily always talk about in driver training is how transformational it is in terms of, yes, gaining freedom and independence, but it's as I said before, it's a weird learning experience. It's not like learning in a school and not like professional training. When you do professional training, it's a different place. And that's why driving instructors can occupy a very different space for the young people in particular in their development into adults as well. As they say, you always remember your driving instructor for good or bad reasons, but we hopefully for good ones. So, developing their social skills is sometimes what you guys are inadvertently doing in the process of training to drive. They start to develop confidence and speaking to new people outside their group of friends and teachers, and have new experience with you that does develop their social skills. And again, going back to empathy, social skills are about being able to share and respecting other people, and that's what we want on the road from people as well. So if you look at the 5 stages, hopefully you begin to see how those emotional attributes relate to driver training. They relate to what you're supposed to be doing and achieving in terms of emotional intelligence and how you should interact with people and what you should bear in mind. But you can see how you would be wanting to try and develop those attributes in your pupils as well. So as I said, we'll develop a full course in the area which will go into each of those 5 stages. We haven't got time for that now. And we're looking at techniques to develop people in some areas that might be struggling with things like, for example, empathy. So there's people who generally discover have problems with empathy because they have elements of sociopathic behavior at one extreme of the scale, or they might be neurodiverse, and empathy is a very challenging thing for them. So we'll break apart in the course each of the 5 stages and really look at what it is in the pupil and you that we want to achieve in the learning process. But when you've got problematic pupils, how do we develop those as well? Okay, so the next thing that we'll explore is, and in that particular extended kind of session that we're looking at, we're also looking at, how does the emotional intelligence world relate to the national standards and also to the GDE, the goals for driver education as well. And there's a lot of parallel there. I will break down a little bit about self-awareness, self-regulation. So self-awareness is basically, as I said, it's about recognizing and understanding your emotions, understanding what you're feeling and why, and appreciating how your emotions and how you react might affect other people. It's about intuition and decision making. So what is your intuition telling you? How are you coming across? How are you reading how that's impacting other people? And some people don't read how they're impacting other people, helping you to make the right choices for you, but also help you make the right choices for the person you're dealing with. It's knowing your strengths and weaknesses, what's important to you, your values or moral compass. And, again, that goes back to developing your self-awareness and that of the pupil. Self-awareness is also sometimes adapting yourself to someone who maybe can't deal with a way that you are, so becoming a bit of a chameleon, that you sometimes have to play down or play up attributes of yourself because you're aware of yourself and how people might be impacted by that. So you might take a different tack with somebody. I'll give you an example. Obviously, someone who's a very nervous individual, if you're very outgoing, if you're self-aware, you might want to play down your very outgoing nature because that person, isn't able to withstand that amount of personality. Self-regulation is the next step. Once you've got that awareness of self, where do I need to regulate my emotions, particularly negative ones, effectively? It's about treating people with respect, trying to stay in control. If people have a tendency to emotional outbursts, practicing being calm, stepping back, taking a deep breath, as I said, changing attributes of yourself sometimes to suit the audience. Not that losing your values and your principles, but being able to not, dim someone else's light, as it were, for you to shine is an example of that. Motivation is the third person element. It's about your drive to improve and achieve, setting high standards for yourself, working consistently with your goals. So if you're very well motivated, you can help motivate other people. So a very motivated, enthusiastic trainer who's reaching for high standards is necessarily going to take their pupils with them in terms of their levels of motivation and their achievement as a consequence. So, demonstrating good motivation to your pupils helps them develop their motivations as well. Then the last 5 stages, again, we talked about empathy, really. I'm not going to go into too much detail in there, but you get it right. If you're not empathetic to what a pupil's going through in both the context of learning to drive, but anything that might be happening with them personally, or their confidence levels, or how they learn, and understanding how they learn, which is why I think it's really important that we actually do neurodiversity training and confidence issue training. It should be there at the base of ADI training before we even qualify people. All this understanding of how human beings are all different, right? And we need to understand that in training them. Empathy is obviously one of the most important skills in any people role, and in particular this people role. So I'll reiterate, you're developing your empathy as a trainer to understand your pupil and what they need to have a successful learning journey, but you're also at the same time developing their empathy because you want them to become a good road using citizen, share the road respectfully, and care that they could harm somebody when they're driving, or themselves or their passengers. And social skills we talked about, it's a weird one to think about a driving instructor developing the social skills of a young person. But I think, some of you will recognize that you very much have been a contributing factor in a young person in particular developing their social skills over the time that they have spent with you as well. Some of the benefits that I would say, and this is only my personal opinion, of emotional intelligence for driver trainers is it's a set of skills that we can all improve. That self-awareness, self-reflection thing leads to us going, do you know what? I talk too much. And I could do with regulating that, particularly around people who aren't quite so verbose as me, and let them have a word in edgeways and let them shine through. So that's the kind of reflection that you do. And I've become a lot better at self-reflecting as I've got older, I think, and less bull in a china shop. And sometimes I do have to be a bull in a china shop because you're dealing with things like ministers and DVSA, and you have to go in and go, no, this is not good enough. But you will always walk away from those encounters. And if you're being professional and you're being a human being, you will always come away and go, did I go too hard there? I know it's my role to take this person to task, but was it too much? Did I, get ahead of myself a little bit? And could I be better? And could the relationship be better and get more done if I soften myself a little bit? So, it's always thinking about yourself. And as a leader, which a trainer is a leader, you're leading somebody on a journey, or as a manager or a boss like me, you're also thinking about how you are and how that impacts other people. So, you want to reflect on that all the time. What do you leave behind? What are the footprints on other people that you're leaving? So there's always improvements to be made, and they could be by adapting the way you communicate, considering how your point will be heard. As I said, an example of that is the difference between assertiveness and aggression when setting firm boundaries. So reflection in itself has a massive benefit, because if it changes something that's slightly negative into a positive, you're on a better road. If we can put ourselves in students' shoes, we can better understand their needs. And if they feel heard and understood, people have a better time in a learning process or a development process. They're more likely to trust the trainer and lean into the training process more if they feel that you're supportive and in tune with them and care about them. You're not just there to tell them, this is how you will learn to drive, and this is how I've always done it, and you will do this. We've moved on from that. We learn that coaching is a better way of doing it, but there's other things we can bring into this that's about us being, as human beings, adaptive to the human beings we teach and getting better outcomes. So the benefit of emotional intelligence training and understanding and techniques is pupils feel heard and understood. They trust you more. They will lean into that learning process more with you. And it equips us with the tools to manage and regulate our own emotions, even in high stress situations. By recognizing that we have these emotions and their detrimental impact on people, we learn to regulate them better. And particularly in a context post-COVID of high stress and high demand and high pressure in our times, that regulation has become more important for instructors who are challenged by parents and pupils and pressured for this, that, and the other, plus work pressures. It's become more important to be able to regulate yourself with all these other people who aren't necessarily regulating their emotions around you. But if you are the person who is regulating the emotions and being the adult in the room, that can help diffuse situations with those who aren't regulating their emotions as well. And so we have that calm and composed demeanor that we need in business, that will be helping developing the pupil and showing them it's better to deal with things in a calm and rational manner when driving, when in life in general, rather than getting upset and throwing all the toys out the pram or having an aggressive reaction. So there's the benefits in psychological terms of doing these things. I mean, emotional intelligence also underpins client-centered learning. If you develop the EQ of your student and are best to support them, that is client-centered learning. And it does relate to the national standard, because if you think of, is it Unit 6.2, designing learning programs? If you read through designing learning programs, if it is 6.2, I'll put the reference in the presentation before we send it round of this. If you read that, with your mind now focused on emotional intelligence and what that is and what that is as an attribute to driver training, you will start to see how designing learning programs, the national standard, is about developing a level of emotional intelligence. And that you have to have the emotional intelligence of being able to read your pupil and what they need in their learning journey to develop an effective learning program. So it very much relates to the national standards. So there is a national standards hook that we try and put any area of new CPD development on, so it's relevant to your profession and where you're going. as I said at the outset, when some of the biggest risks and challenges that we have in driver safety are about attitudes and behaviors, not the basic maneuvering of a vehicle, transferring knowledge and giving them tools to understand those emotions and translate the emotions and how to manage them into positive behaviors is vital. So road safety is now more so about behavioral change techniques and how we create change in behavior than anything else. So emotional intelligence really plays into this behavioral change techniques. And understanding the EQ of people could also help understand where they need the most support and where they're likely to have the most risks when they're out there on their own, and work to bolster those areas of vulnerability in your pupils, because you know that that's where they're going to fall down the most when they go on to be licensed and driving without you as well. There's also benefits of emotional intelligence to your business. And I touched on that at the start of the webinar. If you think about it, the brands that you interact with that show the most empathy, have the most effective communication, and are keen to build rapport with you and find out what else you need and what else they can do for you, those are the brands that you buy into the most. Now, there obviously are brands that do none of that. It's just great product or cheap product that you want. And yes, you're not getting a great customer service or a great customer experience, but it's a product you want. So there's a level of no emotional intelligence in those consumer decisions. And then the example I give is something like Shine. It's going to probably take 6 years to get that dress to you, but it's $9.99, right? So, there's certain decisions that we'll make that are not based on that business being a great brand in terms of customer service, or you don't need a relationship with them. But you're in a service market where, with service markets like this, like training or advisory, or those kind of banking, legal, anything advisory, and also where there's big investments of people's money, you need to build up that rapport. You need to have effective communication. You need to have empathy, and training in particular is a service area where empathy is absolutely paramount. So if customers feel like they're being treated as individuals, and you understand their needs and you care when their needs are not being met by you or by the process, and that you work to adjust the process so they get what they need out of it, they will value you and your brand more. And it's instructors that I see that really care about their pupils, that really care about the experience, that are continually developing their own professionalism and their own knowledge to support their students. Those are the ones that have the great relationships with people beyond the driving test, and also have a great referral network, because that word of mouth that you're looking for, that holy grail of marketing, comes just as much from your skill of getting them through the driving test as it does through the relationship that people enjoyed with you in the process of learning. So the people will attach an emotional attribute to the good instructors. They'll say, oh, go with Karen because she's really nice, she's really warm, she's really friendly. Those are emotional attributes, and those are the USPs that pupil is referring on to that other pupil. So that's where emotional intelligence is a real boon there. So, and when pupils feel emotionally connected to a brand, it builds their loyalty. And you say, well, to some degree, loyalty, the only loyalty I need from my pupils is the referral when they finish learning with you. If actually you're planning to do stuff with pupils beyond the driving test, like advanced driving lessons, or helping support them when they're having difficulties in the first 6 months of learning, and you're saying, come back to me if you want to, you will find that they'll have more loyalty to come to you for that, because they have that rapport with you. Just going to so I'm just going back to the chat. Difficult to keep an eye on just when I'm on my own. Yes, Martin makes a good point. It's difficult to evaluate emotions with somebody who is neurodiverse. In the course, we will go more so into how can we develop the ability for people who are neurodiverse to communicate emotions, and how can we also help them with things like how their emotions impact their ability to learn to drive and how they respond on the road as well. Jeremy, no problem with you leaving. I have a tendency to waffle, and we were late anyway. This will be recorded and you can share it later. You can see it in the DIA Academy webinar, normally about 48 hours to pass the video and be able to get it down to a reasonable size. So don't worry about that. And we're nearly finished here, folks. This is just an exercise that I do when I do it in a classroom basis. They're just asking people to show some emotions. And if you think about the emotions that you have, there's a huge range of emotions that we can feel in the course of a day. Some people and I'm a 49-year-old woman, so other females on this call will understand what I'm talking about. Going through a certain period of my life that's very changeable, I could go through some of these emotions in the space of an hour. So, you know, if we look at all the emotions we're feeling and you put that into the bucket of learning to drive and our pupils feeling like that, there's a whole lot to unpack there. You know, it's you know, it's a demonstration to others who don't train people to drive of how much you've got to deal with out there just in terms of emotions, if nothing else, as well as, you know, getting these people to a standard where they're safe, responsible road using citizens. So, you know, think about emotions that you have and think about what you have, your pupils have, and think about how they affect learning to drive. Just a quick one here as well, and we'll delve into this in the course as well, that you know, emotional intelligence very much plays into the goals for driver education, and whereas particularly new entrants to the industry haven't necessarily got a good handle on the GDE, what it is and how they're supposed to relate to it in driver training. So I'm going to rebirth a GDE training course as well to remind people about it. But fundamentally, the goals for driver education set up as part of an EU project to really look at what is it we need to do with drivers to get them to be safer, responsible individuals, and what's important, what is the big thing that makes them safer drivers. And it's, you know, in that matrix, it's not the lower levels that are the most important. The lower levels are vehicle control and driving in traffic. We can actually get, this study showed, most people to a decent level in the lower levels of the GDE quite quickly. Where safety becomes a bigger issue is actually in the higher levels of the GTD, so these risk increasing aspects. And these are actually, if you see some of the things that are referenced there, like, you know, peer group pressure, sensation seeking, you know, motives in time of day and driving, making bad choices like alcohol, driving tired, stress, that's actually a whole lot of emotional choices that go on there. And that's why emotional intelligence is really important in developing drivers to the upper levels of the goals for driver education matrix, where behavior and changing behavior is the biggest goal in the GDE. So as I said, we'll do a GDE webinar as well soon, because I think we could do with some updating of that and show how GDE is still very relevant and how it tracks against things like the national standards and other things as well. I think some of the positive outcomes in learning for this in this area for trainers is you'll better understand how to evaluate and improve your own emotional intelligence. So improve yourself as a trainer. You'll learn how to read others' emotions, emotional responses, and levels of emotional intelligence. You'll use emotional intelligence to assist training, coaching, and mentoring. And you can help your pupils to understand how they need to develop, evaluate, and improve their emotional intelligence. So when they leave you and get onto their road ahead, they can deal with not just the driving element of it, but actually their attitude and response to risk in their lives generally, and their response to emotions, because driving is a pressure cooker. And, you know, if you're emotional, you're going to have problems in that pressure cooker that are exacerbated by that environment. And some people make good decisions about that, and some people make bad decisions. So, you know, you can be this really positive force of change if we get this right in terms of emotional decisions in driving as people go forward. But you also might be a positive force of change in how they make decisions emotionally in other pressured areas of their lives going forward as well. So obviously bang through that quite quickly in terms of a lot of information. Is there any questions that people have about this particular area, or is it, you know, thumbs up or no response? But do you see emotional intelligence and developing that as an important thing for you as trainers to look into? Good. I'm glad to see that. Martin, did you want to, I've seen your hand raised, did you want to make a comment or talk to me live? I can possibly do that if the technology, let me know in the chat if you wanted to say something. If there's no questions from people at the moment in time, and I'm sure you might have questions as you walk away from this today, and I think we will do this possibly more so as a live Zoom classroom approach when we do the course, or we'll do it as a in-person event, maybe in our Crawley offices or across the country, because I think it's a good one there's a lot of role playing and a lot of tasks and group tasks you can do that are really interesting in this. I've recently done some emotional intelligence practitioner training, and I found that aspect really important. I think you'll really get into how to develop techniques to develop people's EQ and your own, and how you respond to people as well. So I think that's the next step. But if there's any questions on this after this webinar, you know, all of us at DIA, we've got more or less we've got the same configuration of email. So you can always find us. I'm Carly Brookfield, no dot separating my first and second name at driving.org. You can directly email me about anything. You know, that's my role as CEO. You come to me if you've got feedback. You know, obviously we have complaints channels, but if you've got something, a concern, or you want to chat to me about something, or you want my view on something, that is part of my role, is to help, you know, members feel supported in whatever they're thinking about, whether it's training, business development, whatever. But if there's anything on emotional intelligence, I'm just on my learning journey as a practitioner with this now. So I'm happy to have discussions with you about it. But in general, you know, help at driving.org, support at driving.org, the help desk, those guys are there to be emotionally intelligent. That is their role on the help desk, to sit and talk with you when you need some support and help and guidance in your world as well. So don't hesitate to use that. You know, we checked in to the emotional intelligence hotel at the start of the session as a check on our emotions as we approach this new area of learning and how that made us feel. Checking out at the end of the session, how are people feeling as we go out of this session today? Are we feeling good? Are we feeling like, oh God, this is another area of learning I want? But if you give me some thumbs up to say whether you think this has been a good experience, or, you know, if there's an emoji that is still a scared and startled emoji or whatever, I'm trying to be emotionally intelligent to find out whether this was useful to you guys. But certainly I'm finding this area fascinating. Fascinating because you can see that if you'd had elements of this learning in other aspects of your life and other times, you would have been a better manager, trainer, or whatever, or partner and things like that. And I think, you know, there's real benefits to all trainers being exposed to learning in things like emotional intelligence, mindfulness, which is, we're redeveloping that course now. And we'll be developing that probably alongside emotional intelligence. Maybe we'll do a CPD day, that is about what some people would see the softer skills of training that sometimes, you know, we don't get the time to focus on, trying to keep up with the standards and our pupils and everything else that's going on out there. So I've got some good thoughts about how we can expose you lot to some, you know, enjoyable learning and deep dive into some of this stuff, so we really bring out the best aspects of this in ourselves and our pupils. So that's really it for now, folks. I haven't really got anything more to say on this subject. And it's just remembering that we've just done a bit of an emotional checkout about how we've been feeling. And it's remembering that as a student approaches a lesson or their first lesson with you with a degree of trepidation and emotional baggage, they may also be checking out the emotional intelligence hotel with that baggage. So you want to work to, in every session, reducing any of the negative emotions they've got about learning to drive. So by the time they check out that lesson, they're not feeling quite so bad and they're not dreading the next lesson, and encouraging the positive emotions that they have about learning to drive, so they come back to that next session renewed, you know, motivated and wanting to really make it work. So always remember that. And as I'm sure you do, grandma's teaching you to suck eggs now here, but, you know, just think about that check-in process. It doesn't have to be overt. It doesn't have to be, how are you feeling today? You know, because some people don't respond very well. You will, through your emotional intelligence, learn ways and techniques of checking in and checking out with pupils after each session, so they approach the next one and the whole learning journey feeling more comfortable that you are their person that's there to support them and get them the best outcome. But thank you for your time today and bearing with me with my connection problems. And as I said, we'll share this shortly. I'm just going to check the chat to see if there's anything else. Thanks, everybody. I'm glad that this was useful to you. It's really nice to see so many of you on here today. And as soon as we are able to, we will catch up on this as a fuller course for people, and maybe combine it, as I said, with some other stuff around mindfulness and stuff as well. Yeah, great. Well, that's it, folks, for today. And thanks, Martin. That's a very good closing comment from you there, actually, that, you know, we see it in other people that they can't control their emotions sometimes. So if we improve our own awareness, that can only be a right. Yeah, exactly. If we don't lead by example in terms of how we are emotionally intelligent and display our intelligence, we can't expect our pupils to be different, or our children. I've got a 13-year-old. That's a whole emotional intelligence kind of challenge in itself. So I'll leave you with that. Hopefully you've got some sympathy if you've ever had a 13-year-old girl. So thanks very much, and hopefully see you soon. Take care, everyone.